Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, today I'll be modeling a Princess Peach crown and I'll be showing you what my process usually is when I model things. So we'll be starting from scratch with just a reference, and we'll be doing everything from modeling, we'll do texturing, lighting, and rendering. So hopefully you learned something useful from this video. Let's get into it. So I started with a reference. This is a really good one since it's like a full frontal orthographic reference. I just use a cylinder, or rather a circle shape, like a primitive, so I can map out the structure of the crown. So I'm also applying a subdivision modifier so I can see the curvature a bit better, and then I'm using the mirror modifier to get like all sides correct, or rather the same. It takes me a couple of tries because in some cases, let's say something isn't necessarily one per one, so I have to retry it a couple of times. Maybe I also did like a couple of errors in terms of moving vertices, which you'll see in this video. In a couple of minutes I return and correct a couple of things, but as long as I map out the basic structure, it's completely fine. I then test it out with a solidify modifier just to see if there are any issues, and then I try to work around those issues. I use a bevel modifier, and then I try to correct the wrinkles that appear on the actual crown. So the bottom part of the crown was a bit difficult to do. I first tried to working on it with the actual model of the crown, so working from the actual model of the crown, but then I decided maybe using a Bezier curve, or rather just a circle path, and then giving it a bit of depth with the bevel would actually solve my problem. So I got really close, just converted the mesh, and then I tried to model the shape after the actual bottom of the crown. So when I was happy with the results, I just tried to join all of the objects, but I still saw that there were a couple of issues with the bevel modifier and with the whole structure of the crown. So here I'm just deleting everything, so a quarter of the crown remains, and then I work around the actual bevel modifier because I have a bit of crinkling in the lower half, or let's say the lower portion of the curve. So I just correct some additional features, I merge everything, and then I think I corrected the angle of the bevel so it works a bit smoother. I then just correct the vertices that weren't working correctly, and that's it. So when I have the actual form, I then decided to just extrude and try with extrusion because I wasn't necessarily sure the actual Bezier curve would work. And again, I'm just trying to map out the, let's say, the shape of the object. And this one is a fairly straightforward one. I'm just doing a bit of a revision on the crown, and when I'm happy with the overall structure, I just move on to the smaller segments, like the smaller elements, like the crown tops. And then after that, the actual like cushion in the middle. When I'm fairly happy with what I have, I just try different modifier settings, then duplicate and just turn the spheres around. I will correct them in the future because I think I noticed that they weren't necessarily well centered, but as long as it works or gives the approximate like shape, it's completely fine. I use the same approach with the cushion. So basically I start with a primitive. In this case, I start with a UV sphere. I just lower down the number of subdivisions because it gets a bit easier to work with that. It's easier to add than to subtract divisions. So that kind of makes sense, at least for me. And then again, I just try to map out the actual structure of the cushion. I try to think how the cushion basically goes into the crown, and when I'm happy with the form, I just try and do the little details on top, like the wrinkling of the cushion. And again, this is working in like orthographic mode, so when you switch to perspective, some stuff might look good, some stuff might not. So I'm just trying to find like a middle thing, like a middle part where I'm just happy with it. I just want the overall feeling of the crown. I don't want to have like a one per one type of thing. So next up is just the eyes. The eyes are fairly easy, just a subdivision with a loop cut, and it works spot on. Usually when I work with eyes and eyes like that, like the typical like Nintendo type of eyes, I use a shrink wrap object constraint, so that they follow, or rather they fall directly on the object and they follow the object perfectly. I then just return to the reference, correct the size, and just rescale everything, and that's it for the eyes essentially. And the top knob is just 1 second of work, just a duplication, and that's it. I then set these settings for my rendering, just very normal settings, and I start to choose the, let's say, the appropriate HDRI. I usually start with HDRIs because it gives me, let's say, a better perception of the material. Here I'm just trying to match like the, let's say, the gold imitation type of thing, which is kind of like a brushed gold type of thing, while the eyes are completely like have almost no roughness, so they have to be really shiny. So this is basically the most difficult part of this modeling, because getting the cushion material, rather the properties of the cushion material, wasn't that difficult. The problem arose when I tried to do the dots. So you can see here that I started to get stuck because I didn't understand how the actual color ramp was being distributed on the model. So I wanted to put in many positions. In the end, it just didn't solve the problem. Here is just me trying to figure out how the rotation, how the scaling affects it, how the location affects it. So I'm just trying to get that like dot accent on the side, and then it's just trying to figure out how can I make it mirrored. I also tried to just map out the actual dot on the cushion, but I was unsuccessful, so I just reverted back and I tried to work around that problem with the actual like procedural material. I think that I soon try, or rather figure out, that I think I can use the Voronoi texture. I think I then added like a Voronoi texture, which started to, yeah, so here is the Voronoi texture. Just drop down the randomness, drop down the scale. I just used the 2 constant tones on color ramp, and then I tried to map out the first, basically the first dot, and then magically it just fell into place. Basically that was it for the dots. So that's how I solved that problem. I also saw that there was like a really strange behavior, so I just deleted, or rather dissolved, an edge, so I get like a fuller cushion effect. So just added a plane for the backdrop, just making it blue so it contrasts a bit the gold and the pink of the cushion. And then I'm just trying to run the Hdri map a bit differently. I've gone into the habit of playing around with the rotation of the HDRI to find the, let's say, the sweet spot where I have some highlights, some shadows, where part of the object is well lit and the other part is, say, not very well lit. Because an HDRI, I usually just put it for basic reference, and then I create my own mesh lights, as you can see here, that I then use to light the actual object. So here I'm just making a mesh light that shines only on one side. So I'm just trying to position and figure out where should I put this light, where it has like, where does it complement the HDRI, and where does it fight against the HDRI. I had a bit of a problem because I think because of all of the modifiers and everything, the updating of the lights was a bit slow. Also, the HDRI I was using was I think an 8K HDRI, so it took like a couple of seconds to update the lights. But in the end, I think I started to understand, okay, so this is where the lights behave really nicely. This is also a good trick to use with the field of view. So if you ever want to have the feeling of a miniature object, try to use field of view to create that, let's say, imitation of like a miniature scale object. I just imported the grass from a previous project that I had because I thought it really suited the cartoony feeling of the actual scene. And again, I'm just fine-tuning some stuff. I'm just fine-tuning the gold material because it wasn't shiny enough. Then I'm just correcting the lights, again trying to see around the HDRI where the sweet spot is, or maybe some other angle will work a bit better. Yeah, so here you can see I'm happy with the angle. I have enough of a reflection from one side, I have enough darkness on the other. I'm just correcting a couple of details in the scene that I wasn't really happy with. And I think I started to try and figure out where the rim light should fall, because I was missing like that backlighting effect, like the cushion and the gold need to have like a slight glimmer to them. So I wanted to add that glimmer with that type of form. This is just me trying different ways, just resizing, and I think I then switched to an UV sphere, which gives a bit of a different light distribution effect. So I just switched to that one. Also, one thing that I usually do is I just roll back the HDRI and then I try to dial in the mesh lights. Let's dial in the mesh lights, but very slowly. So I'm just playing around with the strength. I'm playing around with the size of the actual emission. So one rule of thumb is I think that backlights should be like really small but very strong, so that they create very harsh shadows. You have a small point of reflection there. So again, just trying different colors, maybe trying different HDRIs. I wasn't necessarily very happy with the results, so I just wanted to see maybe there's something better in the bank that I could use, and like rotating the HDRIs. But in the end, I think I reverted back to the original settings, and I think I started to take away the strength of the map and just playing around with the mesh lights. So just trying to figure out where the best position is. So here I'm just trying to find the sweet spot of the backlight, so that I capture enough cushion but also enough gold reflections. And here I am just using what would that be, like a key light or something, to fill out the space. I put in another fill light, but I wasn't necessarily sure about it, so I just deleted it and then dialed in the actual HDRI. And then it was just time to render. So just a denoiser and that's it. So this is basically it. Thank you so much for watching this one. Hopefully you've learned something from this process. If you like this type of video, feel free to let me know in the comments or drop a like. I always appreciate those. I would like to thank you all for 1,000 subscribers. I was really surprised by that. I just checked in and I'm over the moon. So thank you so much to everyone that helped me achieve this, and hopefully we'll just grow stronger from here. So in any case, thank you so much and have a good one. Bye.